My name is Catherine Miller. I am 70 years old, a widow, and I spent most of my life working as a school librarian. For decades, my life was about quiet routines, books, family, and the little house my husband and I built together. That home, worth $600,000 today, was our pride, our safety, the place where memories clung to the walls like old photographs. I never imagined that place would become the center of a nightmare. It began on what I thought was just another ordinary day. My doctor's office smelled of antiseptic and lavender, the way it always did. Dr. Levinson had been my physician for years, a calm man with steady hands and a gentle way of speaking. I went in for a routine checkup, something I had done countless times. My results were fine. Better than fine, he said. My heart strong, blood pressure steady. He smiled, but that smile didn't reach his eyes. I noticed his hands tremble slightly when he adjusted his glasses. I tried to catch his gaze, but he avoided me. That was strange. Howard, as I called him privately, had always looked people directly in the eye, especially when delivering news. When I rose from the chair and picked up my handbag, his voice lowered to almost a whisper. "Family isn't always what it seems," he muttered. Then, in a movement so quick I almost missed it, he slipped a folded note into my bag. His fingers brushed mine, cool and urgent. I froze. "What was that?" I asked, but he only shook his head. "Take care, Catherine," he said louder, returning to his professional tone, as though nothing unusual had just happened. It wasn't until I stepped outside into the crisp air of the parking lot that I dared to pull the paper from my bag. My breath caught in my throat. In uneven handwriting, the words read, "Don't go home, run." For a long moment I stood there, unable to move, the words pounding in my head like a drum. My first thought was that it had to be some terrible mistake. My family had their flaws, but they were still my family. Michael, my adopted son, had lived under my roof since he was a boy. Clara, his wife, sometimes seemed too calculating, but she had built a life with him. Sophie, my granddaughter, had her teenage coldness, yet she was still blood in my eyes. Why would my doctor warn me against them? But the urgency in his writing, the trembling in his hands, the way his voice had cracked, it wasn't a mistake. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. That night, the truth began to reveal itself. I came home later than usual, clutching the note in my hand like a secret I was almost afraid to read again. Inside the house, laughter died the moment I opened the door. Michael's booming voice cut short. Clara, standing near the kitchen counter, quickly folded a stack of papers and slid them behind her back. Sophie, sitting at the table, forced a smile and said, "Hi, Grandma. I hope you live a long life." But her voice was flat, and her eyes, so much like Michael's, looked past me rather than into me. Something in the room felt off, like stepping into a stage play where everyone forgot their lines. The note burned in my pocket as I climbed the stairs later that evening. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why had he told me to run? Why tonight? I would soon learn the answer. Hidden behind the walls of my own house, I overheard whispers that sliced through me. Michael's voice, low and urgent, saying the words, "power of attorney." Clara's sharper tone, "Once it's in our hands, we can sell the house. 600,000, Michael. We can start over." And then Sophie's chilling addition, "I don't care how you do it. I need that money for college now." The note had saved me. Dr. Levinson had known. He had given me a chance to escape before they pushed me into a cage I would never get out of. If you are listening to me now, you might think this is the kind of story that only happens in movies or books, but it isn't. Families can break in ways you never expect. I nearly lost not just my home, but my freedom, my dignity, and even my life. And I will tell you exactly how it all unfolded, piece by piece, because my silence almost cost me everything. Before I go further, let me say this. If you've ever felt cornered or dismissed, if you've ever been told you were worth less than the life you built, stay with me. My story might just remind you that it's never too late to stand up. And if you believe in justice, in the quiet strength of someone who refuses to give up, then I ask you to stay with me to the very end. Because the night I discovered why my $600,000 house was in danger was the night I understood the people I trusted most were planning to destroy me, and I was not about to let them. When I stepped through the front door that evening, the house felt strangely quiet, like the air had thickened. I had lived in this place for more than 40 years, yet in that moment, I felt like an intruder in my own home. The lights were on, warm and golden, but they did nothing to soften the tension that clung to the walls. Michael's voice trailed off mid-sentence as I entered the living room. He had been speaking quickly, his tone clipped, but now he sat back in the armchair with an expression that shifted too fast from intensity to forced calm. Clara, standing near the dining table, pressed a stack of papers against her side and angled her body so I couldn't see what they were. Sophie's phone buzzed in her hand, and she quickly turned it face down on the table before looking up at me. "Mom," Michael said with exaggerated warmth, rising to give me a kiss on the cheek. His stubble scraped my skin, and I caught a faint smell of whiskey on his breath. "You're back." "How was the doctor?" "Routine," I replied, slipping my handbag onto the chair near the door. My heart pounded, the note in my pocket still folded tightly, its words etched into me. "Nothing unusual." Clara smiled too wide, her lipstick slightly smeared at the corner. "That's good news, Catherine. We were just chatting about family things, planning Sophie's semester." She slid the papers further behind her back as if I hadn't noticed. Sophie spoke up, her voice light but brittle. "I told Grandma I hope she lives a long life today." She let out a little laugh, though it didn't sound genuine. "Didn't I, Mom?" Clara chuckled, but her eyes never left me. "Yes, she did." Such a sweet thing to say. It was anything but sweet. The words landed cold, like a thin blade pressing against my ribs. Sophie rarely spoke to me directly these days, and when she did, her tone carried a distance that stung more than silence. I tried to act natural, lowering myself onto the sofa. "That's kind of you, Sophie," I said softly, though I studied her face. Her eyes darted to her father, then to the papers her mother clutched. She quickly looked away. Michael leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Mom, you've been alone a lot lately," he said with mock concern. "Maybe it's time you let us help more with your day-to-day responsibilities. We could lighten your load, take care of bills, that sort of thing." Clara's very organized. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to smile faintly. "I've been managing fine, Michael. I always have." Clara's lips pressed together in a thin line. "But it's not about managing, Catherine. It's about making things easier. You've done enough. You shouldn't have to worry about paperwork or finances at your age. Leave those things to us." Her words were smooth, but the way she held on to those hidden papers told me this was more than kindness. Something inside me shifted, a quiet alarm rising. I kept my voice calm. "I'll think about it." Sophie crossed her arms and tapped her foot against the leg of the table. "Well, you should," she muttered. "Grandma, you forget things sometimes." "Dad says it's normal, but I think you need help. What if you forget something important?" Her words sliced through me. I remembered all too clearly how Dr. Levinson had warned me. Family isn't always what it seems. Sophie was parroting the very excuse they would use against me. "I keep lists," I replied, trying not to let my voice shake. "I've always been careful." Michael leaned back, his smile returning. "Of course you are, Mom. You've always been the strongest woman I know." He said it as though he were complimenting me, but the quick glance he exchanged with Clara betrayed something else. The silence that followed felt unbearable. I rose and excused myself, claiming I was tired. My legs carried me up the stairs, though every step felt heavier than the last. Halfway up, I glanced back. Clara had already pulled the papers into view again, unfolding them with sharp movements. Michael leaned in close, whispering something I couldn't hear. Sophie's face was pale, her eyes locked on the table as if she wished she were anywhere else. In my room, I closed the door and pressed my back against it, breathing hard. Their smiles, their words of concern, their pretense of care, it was all a performance, and I was the uninvited audience. The note in my pocket seemed to glow with truth. My doctor hadn't been mistaken. I walked slowly to the window and looked out into the night. The garden Richard and I had planted years ago stretched out in quiet beauty, roses swaying in the faint breeze. He had always said the house was our anchor, our promise to each other. And now, those I had once trusted most were circling like vultures, ready to take it all away. Downstairs, muffled voices carried through the floorboards, urgent and low. My heart thudded in my chest as I pressed my ear against the wooden door. Words drifted upward. Signatures. Papers. Next step. I shivered. I thought of the moment Clara had hidden those documents, the way Sophie's wish for my long life had landed with icy detachment, the false tenderness in Michael's voice. They thought they were clever, that I was blind, but I had seen enough. As I turned off the lamp and settled into bed, I knew sleep would not come. My home, the place I had cherished for so many years, no longer felt safe. Every shadow seemed to whisper betrayal, and for the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own sanctuary. That night, long after the house had gone silent, I sat in my bedroom with the folded paper in my hand. I had read it once outside the doctor's office, but I had been too stunned to take in anything beyond those 4 words. Don't go home, run. Now, with the darkness pressing against the windows and the faint creaks of the house settling, I opened it again, letting the light from my bedside lamp spill over the page. The handwriting was hurried, uneven, but there was no mistaking the gravity in every line. My eyes moved slowly over the sentences, and I felt each one carve into me like a blade. Catherine, I must warn you. Your family asked me to declare you incompetent. They want to have you committed to a nursing home. They are planning to sell your house. Do not go home. Do not trust them. Please protect yourself. My hands trembled as I read the words aloud under my breath. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and the room seemed to tilt. Michael. My Michael. The boy I had raised with bedtime stories and Sunday pancakes. The boy who once clung to my hand and called me Mommy with such devotion. He'd asked my doctor to declare me incapable of taking care of myself. Clara, I could almost believe. She'd always been ambitious, quick with sharp words and sharper glances. But Michael, he was the little boy I once defended from bullies, the teenager I stayed up with during storms when thunder scared him. And Sophie, my granddaughter, 19 years old with the world ahead of her. Was she truly part of this? The words on the page said nothing about her, but I had overheard enough that evening to know she was not innocent. Her voice, echoing in my mind, still chilled me. I need that college money now. I pressed the note against my lap, rocking gently as if the motion could ease the ache that had spread through my body. My late husband Richard's photograph sat on the nightstand, his steady eyes meeting mine. I lifted the frame and whispered, "Did we raise him wrong? Did I?" The silence of the room gave no answer. I thought of the years Richard and I spent working for that house. Every dollar we saved went into its walls. The roof we repaired together, the garden he tended with pride, the little reading nook he built for me when I retired. It wasn't just property. It was the living memory of our marriage, of a life of sacrifice and love. To think of it sold off, dismantled by greed, made me feel physically ill. I lowered the note to the bed and clasped my hands tightly. My mind spun with questions. How long had they been planning this? How much had they already done behind my back? Clara's hidden documents, Sophie's distant gaze, Michael's overdone concern, all of it began to take shape in my mind like a puzzle clicking together. They wanted me out of the way. They wanted my home, my savings, the last fruits of everything Richard and I had built. I tried to steady my breathing, but tears blurred my vision. I thought of Michael as a little boy again, standing in the yard with a fistful of wildflowers, declaring, "Don't worry, Mommy. When you're old, I'll take care of you." I remembered how proud Richard had been that day, saying, "He's a good one, Catherine. He'll never let you down." How cruel time had proven us both wrong. The paper crinkled as I clutched it tighter. The words weren't just a warning. They were a lifeline. Dr. Levinson had risked his position to give me this truth. He must have seen through their lies, must have recognized the danger I was in. I owed him more than I could say. Without this note, I might have walked blindly into a trap that would have left me locked away, my home sold, my name reduced to a signature on a legal form I never meant to sign. I rose and moved to the window, looking out into the yard bathed in moonlight. The roses Richard planted still swayed gently, their pale petals gleaming. For years, that garden had been my refuge. Tonight, it felt like the only part of the house that hadn't betrayed me. I touched the cold glass, pressing the note against it. "They won't take this from me," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I believed it yet. Behind me, the floorboards creaked faintly. My heart jumped. I quickly folded the note and slid it into the lining of my handbag, hiding it where I prayed no one would think to look. I turned off the lamp and climbed into bed, pulling the covers tight around me. But I did not sleep. My ears strained for every sound, the shifting of wood, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the faint voices drifting up the stairs when Clara and Michael thought I was too old to hear. I kept my eyes open until dawn began to bleed through the curtains. The words of that note seared into me, each syllable echoing louder with every passing hour. By morning, one truth had settled deep into my bones. My family was no longer my safe place. My home was no longer my sanctuary. And if I wanted to survive, I had to see them for what they had become. The following evening, I moved through the house with the kind of care one usually reserves for walking across ice. Every step felt dangerous, every breath too loud. I had tucked Dr. Levinson's note deep into the lining of my handbag, but the words pulsed inside me with a life of their own. My body was tense, my senses sharpened, because I knew if I paid close enough attention, they would reveal themselves. From my bedroom, I heard faint voices below. Michael's baritone rumbled, Clara's sharper tone overlapped his, and Sophie's younger voice rose in protest. Something told me I had to hear every word. Quietly, I opened my door, each creak of the hinges sounding like a scream in the stillness. I slipped out, my bare feet brushing against the carpet, and slowly made my way to the landing that overlooked the living room. The railing cast long shadows in the dim light, and I crouched low, peering between the spindles. Michael stood pacing near the fireplace, running a hand through his thinning hair. "She's tougher than I thought," he muttered. I gave Dr. Levinson every reason to sign the papers, and he hesitated. He kept asking if I was sure Clara's voice cut through, smooth and venomous. "You should have pushed harder." "We need this finished. That house is worth $600,000. Do you realize what we could do with that money? We're drowning, Michael. The debts won't wait." Michael slammed his fist against the mantel, and I flinched at the sound. "Don't talk to me about debts." "I know exactly how deep we're in. 80,000. That's the number. Do you think I don't feel it breathing down my neck every second?" Sophie's voice was sharper than I expected. "I don't care about your debts, Dad. I care about college. You promised me tuition would be ready by fall. Everyone at school thinks Grandma's losing her mind anyway. I already told them she has Alzheimer's. They believed me, and I borrowed money off it. Now I need the real thing." Her words pierced me deeper than any blade. My knees weakened, and I had to grip the railing to steady myself. My own granddaughter had used my name, my health, as a lie to gain sympathy and money. The girl I once sang lullabies to had turned my existence into a bargaining chip. Clara leaned toward her daughter, her voice lowering but still audible. "Patience, Sophie. We're almost there. Once we get power of attorney, everything is ours. But your grandmother is stubborn. We may have to speed things up." Michael stopped pacing and turned, his face twisted in frustration. "Speed things up how?" Clara shrugged, but there was a glint in her eye. "She's old. She forgets things. If she forgets a little more, if the wrong pill gets swapped here or there, no one would question it. People decline fast at her age. All it takes is a push." Sophie's expression was uncertain, but she didn't object. "Just make sure it happens before tuition's due." "I can't wait." My stomach churned and bile rose in my throat. I pressed a hand against my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. They were planning to poison me, to manipulate my medicine until my mind slipped or my body failed. They wanted me not just gone, but destroyed. Michael lowered his head into his hands. "I can't believe we're talking about this." Clara's reply was swift. "Believe it. Because this is survival. Do you want loan sharks knocking on our door? Do you want Sophie dropping out because we can't pay? Or do you want a fresh start, debt-free, with $600,000 in our hands?" There was silence for a moment, broken only by the sound of Sophie's fingers tapping nervously against the table. Finally, Michael exhaled. "Fine. But it has to look natural. No suspicions." "Of course," Clara said smoothly. "Leave it to me." I already switched her tea last week with a stronger sleeping pill. She nearly fell down the stairs. Next time, she won't be so lucky. The room swam before me, my vision blurring as their words sank in. I had almost died, and it hadn't been an accident. It had been Clara. She had already begun the process of erasing me. I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. My breath came shallow, my heart pounding so hard I feared they could hear it. I returned to my bedroom, closing the door silently and pressing my back against it. My legs gave way, and I slid to the floor, trembling. The people downstairs were supposed to be my family, the ones I had given my life to, the ones I had fed, clothed, and sheltered. Yet they spoke of me as though I were an obstacle, a problem to solve, a sum of money to cash in. Their voices still echoed in my ears. Clara's cold logic, Michael's desperation, Sophie's demand. I curled my arms around myself, trying to breathe through the storm in my chest. For the first time, I truly understood the danger I was in. They weren't waiting for me to decline naturally. They were pushing me toward that decline. And if I didn't find a way to protect myself, they would succeed. As the house settled into silence again, I sat in the darkness with the note from Dr. Levinson clutched to my chest. He had known. He had seen what I hadn't wanted to believe. My family wasn't just planning to take my house. They were planning to erase me. And now I knew I had to act before they did. I sat on the floor of my bedroom with my back pressed to the door, the sound of their voices still clawing at my ears, even though the house had fallen silent again. My body trembled as though I were a child caught in a storm, yet I was 70 years old. I had lived through hardship, through loss, through the slow fading of my husband into memory. But nothing had prepared me for the kind of betrayal that seeps into your bones when it comes from those you once loved most. The note lay crumpled in my lap, the ink smudged from the sweat of my hands. I thought of Michael's voice downstairs, the same voice that once shouted with glee when he ran into my arms as a boy. I remembered his little feet pounding the hardwood floor, his hair messy from the wind, his cheeks flushed. He had run across the yard one summer afternoon, no more than 6 years old, holding a fistful of wildflowers he had picked from the edge of the garden. He presented them to me like treasure, saying, "Don't worry, Mommy. When you're old, I'll take care of you." I had bent down, my eyes stinging with tears, and hugged him so tightly he squealed. That memory had been my anchor through the years of raising him, the reminder that love could grow even when blood wasn't shared. Now the sound of his grown-up voice echoed in my head, talking about debts, about my house as though it were a prize to be claimed. The contrast was unbearable. I pressed my palm to my chest, trying to hold the pieces of my heart together. It felt like everything inside me was shattering. I rose slowly, my knees stiff, and moved to the dresser where Richard's photograph rested. My husband had been gone for 12 years, yet his eyes in that picture seemed alive, steady, comforting. I picked up the frame and whispered to him as I often did when the loneliness grew heavy. "Richard, what would you say if you could see us now? What would you think of the boy we gave everything to?" My voice cracked, and I set the frame against my heart, clutching it as though the glass could carry warmth. The room blurred with tears. I sank into the chair by the window and let the memories wash over me. I saw Richard in the backyard, his hands rough from years of work, planting roses for me because he knew they were my favorite. I saw Michael as a teenager, tall and awkward, sitting with Richard on the porch steps, listening to his stories about perseverance and integrity. Richard had believed in him so fiercely. He used to say, "Catherine, this boy will make us proud. He'll stand by you when I'm gone." How wrong we had been. The ache in my chest deepened as another memory surfaced. It was Christmas Eve many years ago when money was tight and we could barely afford gifts. Michael had found an old watch in a second-hand shop, polished it until it gleamed, and placed it under the tree for Richard. "Because Dad deserves something nice," he had said. Richard had worn that watch every day until the end of his life. That same boy now plotted to strip me of the house his father built brick by brick. The betrayal twisted inside me, sharp and relentless. I thought of Sophie, too, my granddaughter, who once curled up in my lap while I read her bedtime stories. She used to fall asleep with her tiny hand resting against my arm. The girl who once clung to me for comfort had grown into someone who could spread lies about my mind unraveling, all for the sake of money. I felt as though a cold hand had gripped my heart. For a long time, I sat in silence, staring at the shadows shifting across the floor. I wanted to scream, to pound my fists against the walls, to demand answers from the people who had turned against me. But the anger was buried beneath a heavier weight: grief. The grief of losing my family not to death, but to greed. The grief of realizing that the love I had poured into them was not enough to save them from themselves. I wiped my tears and whispered to Richard's photo again. "You built this home for us. You told me it would keep me safe, but now it feels like a prison. They're planning to poison me, to erase me, to take everything we worked for. And I don't know if I'm strong enough." My words dissolved into the night air, and the silence gave no reply. Yet beneath the grief, something stirred. It was faint, but it was there. A flicker of the same strength that carried me through burying my husband and learning to live alone. I thought of the garden, of Richard's roses still blooming. I thought of the promise I had once made to him, that I would protect what we built together. The betrayal hurt, but it also hardened me. They thought I was frail, too weak to resist. They thought I would crumble quietly. I pressed the photo back onto the dresser and wiped my face. My heart was still breaking, but within the cracks, a resolve was forming. I would not let Michael and Clara write the end of my story. I would not let Sophie's lies define who I was. They could take my trust, but they would not take my dignity without a fight. As I lay down at last, exhaustion heavy on my body, I closed my eyes and held Richard's memory close. The pain of betrayal was raw, but in that pain, a promise grew stronger. They would not destroy me. I would make sure of it. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness in my body, though I knew it wasn't from age alone. My sleep had been restless, haunted by the words I overheard the night before. I lingered in bed longer than usual, listening for sounds in the house. The clink of dishes drifted up from the kitchen, followed by Clara's voice humming faintly, too cheerful, too practiced. I forced myself to rise, straighten the quilt, and prepare for another day in a home that no longer felt like mine. When I came downstairs, the smell of tea already filled the air. Clara stood by the stove with her back to me, a porcelain teapot steaming gently in her hand. She turned quickly when she heard me, her smile blooming as if she had been waiting. "Good morning, Catherine. You must be tired after yesterday. I thought I'd make you something warm." The teacups were already arranged on the table, neat and symmetrical. My chest tightened as I recalled her voice whispering about the wrong pill, about a push. I pulled my sweater tighter around me and sat cautiously at the table. Clara poured the amber liquid into my cup, the steam curling upward. Michael appeared a moment later, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes slightly bloodshot. "Morning, Mom," he said, his tone too light. "Clara's taking good care of you." I managed a thin smile and lifted the cup to my lips. Though I didn't drink, the warmth of the porcelain seeped into my fingers. I pretended to blow on the surface, watching Clara closely. Her eyes followed the movement of the cup, her own hand brushing the papers she had stacked nearby. Sophie came in, earbuds dangling from her ears, her gaze sliding over me. "You should drink it, Grandma," she said flatly. "It'll help you relax." "You've seemed off lately." Her words echoed too closely to the lie she had already told her friends. I set the cup back down. "I'll drink in a minute," I said, steadying my voice. "It's still too hot." Clara's smile didn't falter, but I saw the faintest twitch in her jaw. "Of course. Take your time." She turned to busy herself with the sink, though her movements were too quick, too rehearsed. Michael shuffled through the papers, muttering about bills, about overdue notices. He avoided my eyes, but his voice carried an edge of frustration. "We can't keep waiting, Clara." "Something has to give." "I know," she answered softly, glancing over her shoulder at me. "It's only a matter of time." The tea sat before me, its surface trembling slightly, as if it, too, carried my fear. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to act normal. I lifted the cup again, touching it to my lips without drinking, then set it back down. "I think I'll have some toast first," I said, pushing the cup slightly away. Sophie rolled her eyes. "You're always stalling." She grabbed her backpack and left the room, muttering something I couldn't catch. I rose and moved toward the stairs, claiming I had forgotten my reading glasses. My legs shook as I climbed, but I kept my steps even. Once in my room, I leaned against the door, gasping for air. The image of Clara slipping something into my drink haunted me. The warning in their whispered conversation the night before had not been idle. They were already carrying it out. I thought of Richard, of the roses he planted, of the promise I had made to protect what we built. My hand clenched the railing as I resolved to stay alert. But when I returned downstairs, Clara met me with the cup again. "You should drink before it cools," she said, her tone sweet but her eyes sharp. I forced myself to take a sip, the liquid bitterer than usual, with an aftertaste I couldn't place. My stomach clenched, and I set the cup down quickly. "It's strong," I murmured, rising to steady myself against the chair. The room tilted slightly, the edges of my vision blurring. Clara's gaze lingered, then she smiled faintly. "Maybe you should rest upstairs." Michael gave a non-committal grunt and shuffled through the mail again. My knees buckled as I tried to take a step, and I caught the edge of the staircase just in time. The world swayed, and for a terrifying moment I thought I would tumble down. My fingers gripped the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. The house was spinning, but I forced myself to breathe, to plant my feet firmly. "I'll be fine," I said, though my voice shook. "I just need some fresh air." Clara reached out as if to steady me, but I pulled away, every nerve in my body screaming that her touch was not safety. I made it to the front door, each step deliberate, as though I were walking through water. Outside, the cool air hit me like a lifeline. I gulped it in, leaning against the frame, the dizziness slowly receding. Behind me, Clara's voice floated from the kitchen. "She's slipping faster than I thought." Michael didn't answer, or perhaps his reply was too quiet for me to hear. I closed my eyes and steadied myself. They thought they were winning. They thought their plan was working, but I was still standing, still breathing, and still aware. And that meant I still had a chance. When I finally returned to my room, I locked the door behind me. My hands shook as I emptied the contents of my handbag, finding the small tape recorder I had used years ago for interviews at the library. I tested it, hearing the soft click as it captured the silence. From that moment, I knew I would no longer wait helplessly. I would gather proof. I lay on my bed, my body heavy, my mind replaying every word, every look, every sip of that bitter tea. They wanted me gone, but I would not fall so easily. They had underestimated me, and that would be their mistake. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, every creak of the old house sounding like a warning. The bitter taste of the tea still lingered on my tongue, and the memory of nearly collapsing on the stairs replayed over and over. I knew now, with a clarity I could no longer ignore, that staying under the same roof with Michael and Clara meant gambling with my life. They weren't waiting for time to take me naturally. They were pushing me toward the edge, one cup, one pill, one shove at a time. I thought of Richard's photo on the dresser and the promise I had made to myself after he passed. I had sworn that I would live with dignity, that I would honor the life we built. Letting them strip me of my mind, my home, and my freedom would betray everything he and I had worked for. Tears pricked my eyes, but beneath the grief, a fire flickered. I could not stay. I had to go. And this time, I would not run as a victim. I would walk out as a woman, preparing to fight. I rose from bed quietly, careful not to let the floorboards groan under my weight. My room was dark except for the faint glow of the moon through the curtains. I opened my closet and pulled out a small suitcase, the kind I used years ago when Richard and I would take weekend trips to the coast. My hands shook as I packed, but my movements were deliberate. Documents first, the deed to the house, insurance papers, Richard's old watch that still ticked faintly. I tucked Dr. Levinson's note between the pages of a folder. If they tried to paint me as unstable, this warning would speak louder than their lies. I slid open the drawer of my nightstand and found the small voice recorder I had tested earlier. I held it for a moment, the plastic cool against my palm. From now on, every conversation would be captured. If Michael called me confused, the world would hear the truth. If Clara pressed me with her fake kindness, I would have her words to prove it. I placed fresh batteries inside and tested the red light until it blinked steady. It was my shield, my witness in the silence of the house. I added clothing, just a few essentials, and my jewelry box, though it held little more than sentimental pieces now that Clara had stolen so much. At the bottom of the box lay the ring Richard gave me on our 40th anniversary, a simple band with a tiny ruby. I slipped it onto my finger, whispering to him, "I'm not done yet." The hardest part was preparing to walk past their doors. Michael and Clara slept down the hall, their room dark and quiet. Sophie's door was cracked open, the glow of her phone lighting her face as she scrolled. For a moment I paused outside, my heart heavy. She was still so young. I wanted to believe she could change, that somewhere inside her, the little girl who once loved bedtime stories still existed. but the memory of her voice saying she had already told her friends I had Alzheimer's hardened me. I stepped away. In the kitchen, I moved quickly, pulling a few bills of cash from the drawer I had hidden them in long ago. Richard had always said, "Keep a little aside for emergencies." He would never have imagined this would be the emergency. I stuffed the money into my handbag along with the recorder. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that feels like a trap. I grabbed my suitcase and pulled it gently across the floor, wincing at every squeak of the wheels. When I reached the front door, my hand hesitated on the knob. Behind me lay decades of memories, the echo of Richard's laughter, the walls where Michael's height had once been marked in pencil. But behind me also lay betrayal, poison, lies, and danger. Ahead of me lay uncertainty, but also a chance to survive. I turned the knob slowly and stepped into the night. The cool air hit my face, fresh and sharp. I pulled the door closed as quietly as I could, then walked down the path lined with roses. Their petals gleamed pale under the moonlight, and I felt Richard's presence there, reminding me that strength sometimes means leaving behind what you love most in order to protect it. I wheeled my suitcase down the street, my heart hammering, my eyes scanning every shadow. I didn't know where I would sleep yet, but I knew I had to disappear before they noticed I was gone. Tomorrow they would look for me, maybe call the police, pretend they were concerned, but by then I would already be a step ahead, gathering proof, building my defense, turning their plot against them. As I reached the corner, I pulled out my recorder and pressed the button, whispering into it. "My name is Catherine Miller. I am 70 years old. If anything happens to me, this is my record. My family is trying to take my home and my freedom. They have already tried to drug me. I am leaving tonight to save myself." The words shook as they left my lips, but hearing them captured gave me strength. I tucked the recorder back into my bag and kept walking. Each step away from the house felt lighter, though fear still pressed against my back. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing with certainty. I had chosen to fight, and for the first time in days, despite the weight of betrayal, I felt a flicker of hope. I walked for nearly 20 minutes before I reached the bus stop at the edge of town. The early morning air was cool against my face, and each breath steadied me. I didn't look back. The street lamps flickered, casting shadows that stretched across the pavement, but I kept moving forward with my suitcase rattling behind me. When the bus finally arrived, I climbed aboard and took a seat near the back. Only 2 other passengers sat scattered among the rows, both too lost in their own worlds to notice the trembling old woman clutching her handbag. The ride was quiet, just the hum of the engine and the faint squeak of brakes at each stop. I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the town roll past. Every corner reminded me of a different memory. Sundays at church with Richard, afternoons walking Michael to the park, summers when Sophie begged for ice cream. It all felt poisoned now, as though those places no longer belonged to me. By the time we reached the small strip of hotels near the highway, my decision was firm. I wasn't going back. I chose a modest inn with peeling paint and a buzzing neon sign that read, "Vacancy." The man at the front desk hardly looked at me as I signed the register, my handwriting shaky from exhaustion. He slid the key across the counter without a word, and I climbed the narrow stairs to a room on the 2nd floor. It smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke, but it was mine. I locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and sank onto the bed. For the first time in days, I exhaled without fear of someone listening outside my door. Sleep claimed me in fits and starts, but by late morning I was awake again, hungry and anxious. I dug into my handbag for the envelope of cash I had hidden away years earlier. Richard's voice came back to me, reminding me why we saved it. "For emergencies, Catherine. You never know what tomorrow brings." I could almost hear him say it with that half-smile he always wore when he wanted to soften a serious moment. Well, tomorrow had come. With the money in hand, I walked 2 blocks to the bank where I'd done business for decades. Patricia Gomez was behind the counter, her dark hair pulled back neatly, her expression brisk but kind. She looked up and greeted me by name, as she always had. "Mrs. Miller, what brings you in today?" "I need to withdraw some cash," I said softly, leaning closer, "and I need to check my accounts." Something doesn't feel right. Patricia tapped at her keyboard, her brow furrowing. "Do you know about this new credit card?" she asked. My heart skipped. "What credit card?" She turned the monitor slightly toward me, lowering her voice. "There was an account opened under your name last month. It's nearly maxed out." I felt my knees weaken, and I gripped the counter to steady myself. "That's impossible." I didn't open any new account. Patricia's eyes narrowed. I thought it was odd. "The signature didn't look like yours, but everything checked out on paper. It must have been someone close enough to know your details." Clara's face flashed before me instantly, the way she hid papers behind her back, the cold smile she wore as she poured my tea. "It was my daughter-in-law," I whispered, more to myself than to Patricia. "She's been stealing from me." Patricia's expression softened. She lowered her voice even further. "Do you want me to print the records?" "Transactions? Dates? Everything?" "Yes," I said, my voice firm for the first time that day. I need it all. While she worked, I withdrew $7,000 in cash and tucked it carefully into my bag. It was enough to buy me time to cover a hotel room, food, maybe even help from someone who could guide me legally. I felt the weight of the bills like armor against the uncertainty ahead. Patricia slid an envelope across the counter. "Be careful, Mrs. Miller. If someone's willing to go this far, they may not stop." I met her eyes and nodded. "I know." "Thank you for trusting me enough to say it outside." The sun was bright, but the warmth didn't reach me. I walked back to the inn, clutching the envelope of records to my chest. Each page inside was proof, a piece of the truth that could no longer be denied. Clara wasn't just manipulative. She was a thief. She had forged my name, taken my identity, and used it to sink her claws deeper into what wasn't hers. Back in my room, I spread the papers across the bed and studied them carefully. Charges for jewelry stores, luxury items, expensive dinners, all under my name. I thought of Richard's watch, of the ruby ring I had slipped onto my finger the night before, and realized how much of my life had already been stolen piece by piece. My eyes burned with anger, but I forced myself to breathe. This was no longer about just surviving. It was about proving what they had done. I packed the records neatly into my suitcase, alongside my most important documents. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I whispered to myself, "This is the beginning." The bitterness of the tea still lingered in my mouth, a reminder of how close I had come to falling into their trap. But here, in this modest room, I felt the faintest thread of control return. I had money in my bag, proof in my hands, and the will to fight still burning in my chest. They had underestimated me. They thought I was too old, too frail, too blind to see. But I saw everything now, and I was not done. The next morning, I woke with a clarity that cut through the exhaustion in my bones. I had the papers Patricia gave me spread out on the small desk in the corner of the inn's room, each one shouting the truth I could no longer deny. Clara had stolen from me, and Michael had helped her plot. Sophie had lied to protect their story. And if I didn't act now, my house and my freedom would vanish before I could blink. I thought of Richard again, of the promises he made when we built that house. "This home will outlast us," he had said, his hand firm on mine. "It'll be your anchor if I'm gone." Well, he was gone, and they were trying to pry the anchor from my hands. I would not let it happen. I needed someone who could stand beside me in a fight that was no longer only about survival, but about justice. That was when I remembered the name that had been passed around my church circle months ago, Daniel Whitmore, a lawyer known for helping older people who had been mistreated by their own families. I found his number in a directory and dialed from the phone in my room. My fingers shook as I pressed the buttons, but my voice was steady when he answered. "Mr. Whitmore? My name is Catherine Miller. I need help." There was a pause, then a calm, measured reply. "Mrs. Miller, can you come to my office today? The sooner I understand your situation, the better." An hour later, I was standing in front of a modest brick building downtown with a brass plaque that read, "Whitmore and Associates, Elder Law." I clutched my folder of evidence like a shield as I walked in. The receptionist looked up, and when I gave my name, she led me into an office lined with shelves of heavy books. Daniel Whitmore stood as I entered. He was in his early 50s, tall with a kind but serious face, and his handshake was firm without being overpowering. "Mrs. Miller," he said, gesturing for me to sit, "tell me everything from the beginning." So I did. I told him about Dr. Levinson slipping the note into my bag, about Michael and Clara whispering about my house, about Sophie lying to her friends that I had Alzheimer's. I told him about the bitter tea, about nearly falling down the stairs, about the bank records Patricia had given me. My voice shook sometimes, but I didn't stop. I laid the papers out on his desk like a trail of breadcrumbs leading to the truth. Daniel listened without interrupting, his eyes steady, his pen moving across a yellow pad in quick strokes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly, and said, "Mrs. Miller, what you're describing is elder abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy. It is serious, and it is criminal." Hearing the words spoken aloud made my heart pound. I had known it deep down, but to hear a lawyer say it without hesitation gave me both fear and strength. "I'm scared," I admitted. "They think I'm too old, too weak to fight them. But I won't just hand them everything Richard and I built. I need to stop them before it's too late." Daniel leaned forward, his tone resolute. "You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone anymore. From this moment on, you have me in your corner. I've seen families try to tear down the people who raised them, but the law is clear, and the evidence you've brought me is powerful. With your testimony and these documents, we can build a case that will hold." I felt tears sting my eyes, not from grief this time, but from relief. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't carrying this burden by myself. He continued, "First, we'll secure your assets. I'll contact the bank to put a freeze on any fraudulent accounts. Then we'll gather more proof, recordings, witnesses, anything that shows a pattern of abuse. Do you feel safe where you are now?" I shook my head. "Not really, but it's safer than that house." "Then stay there for now," he said firmly. "Do not go back until we have more protection in place. If they contact you, record everything. If they push you, let them, because it will only strengthen your case. But above all, don't let them corner you again." I nodded, gripping the edge of my chair. His words gave me something solid to hold on to. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't know if I can ever forgive them, but I can't let them win." Daniel's gaze softened. "You don't need to forgive them right now. You just need to protect yourself. Justice will do the rest." When I left his office, the weight in my chest felt lighter, though the road ahead was still dark. I had a lawyer now, someone who saw me not as a burden but as a client worth fighting for. My hand still trembled as I clutched my folder, but this time it was from the adrenaline of hope, not just fear. I returned to the inn, sat on the bed, and stared at the papers again. They were no longer just proof of betrayal. They were weapons, and with Daniel's help, I would wield them. For the first time since that note slipped into my bag, I believed I might actually win. The following days blurred together as I tried to keep my strength steady in that small inn room. Daniel called me regularly, his voice calm but determined, each time assuring me that progress was being made. One morning, he told me he had hired a private investigator, someone with a reputation for thorough work. His name is Mark Jensen, Daniel explained. He doesn't waste time, and he knows how to uncover what others try to bury. If your family has been hiding things, he'll find them. I met Mark in Daniel's office 2 days later. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, tall with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He shook my hand firmly and said, "Mrs. Miller, I'm here to help. I'll need you to tell me everything you know, habits, routines, places they might go, people they might talk to. Anything could become a lead." So I did. I described Clara's suspicious trips to the jeweler, Michael's constant phone calls late at night, Sophie's new designer purse that seemed far too expensive for a college student. Mark listened without judgment, scribbling notes in a small black notebook. When I finished, he nodded. "That's enough for me to start. Give me a few days." Those days felt long. I spent hours pacing my small room, reading and rereading the papers Patricia had given me, trying to steady my nerves. At night, I recorded entries into my voice recorder, recounting everything that had happened since the doctor's warning. If anything happened to me, I wanted the world to know. On the 4th day, Daniel called and asked me to come to his office again. When I arrived, Mark was already there, a folder thick with documents resting on the desk. His eyes met mine, steady but grim. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "you were right. They've already begun taking from you." He opened the folder and spread photographs across the desk. The first showed Clara in a pawn shop, handing over a velvet jewelry box I recognized instantly. It had been my mother's, passed down to me on my wedding day. I felt my stomach twist. Mark explained. "She's been selling off jewelry in your name." I traced the transactions. She forged receipts and pocketed the cash. The next set of papers showed gambling debts linked to Michael, dozens of late-night transfers, betting accounts, names of bookies. Mark tapped the paper with his pen. 80,000. He's been desperate, and from the looks of it, he's only sinking deeper. I pressed my hand to my mouth. Hearing the number out loud made my chest ache. My son, the boy who once swore to protect me, was drowning in debt and dragging me down with him. Mark laid out another document, this one more painful than the rest. "Your granddaughter, Sophie. She's been telling her friends you're not well, that you have Alzheimer's. She borrowed money from at least 3 of them, promising it would be repaid once she got her inheritance." I spoke with one of the families. They were shocked, but they confirmed it. I shook my head slowly, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. Sophie's sweet face as a child flashed in my memory, her hand tugging mine as we baked cookies together. And now she had turned me into a story, a lie, to buy herself sympathy and money. Daniel leaned forward, his voice firm. "This is exactly the kind of evidence we need." With Clara's theft, Michael's gambling, and Sophie's false claims, we can prove a pattern of exploitation. The law is very clear. This isn't just family conflict, it's abuse. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced myself to breathe. "It feels like everything I ever gave them has been turned against me," I whispered. Mark's tone softened, though his words carried weight. "They underestimated you. They assumed you wouldn't notice, that you wouldn't have the strength to push back. But you're here, and you're fighting. That makes all the difference." I gathered the photographs and documents into a neat pile, my hands trembling as I touched each piece. These weren't just papers. They were proof of how far the people I had loved had fallen. Proof that I hadn't been imagining things. Proof that I was still in control of my own story. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on mine. "This gives us leverage. They can't gaslight you anymore. We'll keep building. We'll bring this into the light. But I need you to stay safe, Catherine. No contact with them directly until we're ready." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I won't go back to that house. Not until justice is ready to meet them." When I left the office that day, the folder tucked under my arm, I felt both broken and rebuilt at the same time. My heart ached with the weight of betrayal, but beneath that ache lay a new determination. They had stolen, lied, and schemed, but I had truth on my side. Back in my small inn room, I placed the folder on the desk beside Richard's photo. I traced his smile with my fingertip and whispered, "We're going to win this, Richard. They won't take what we built." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept with the faint comfort of knowing I wasn't alone. Daniel and Mark were with me, and the truth was beginning to shine through the darkness. I was sitting at the desk in my small inn room when the phone buzzed beside me. The number flashing across the screen made my chest tighten. It was Michael. For a moment, I considered letting it ring, but something inside me told me to answer. I reached for my recorder, pressed the red button, and then lifted the phone slowly to my ear. "Mom," his voice came, smooth at first, too smooth. "Where are you?" "We've been worried sick." I closed my eyes, forcing myself to steady my breathing. Worried sick? That's interesting, considering what I heard in my own house. There was a pause, long enough that I knew he was choosing his next words carefully. "You must have misunderstood. You're not yourself lately, Mom. You've been confused." The words landed exactly as I expected. They wanted to frame me as unstable. I clenched my hand around the phone, but I kept my tone calm. "Confused, am I? Then explain why Clara opened a credit card in my name. Explain why my jewelry has been pawned. Explain why Sophie told her friends I have Alzheimer's." His breath caught audibly. "Where did you hear that?" "I don't need to explain where. I have proof, Michael. Documents, recordings, witnesses. Do you still want to call me confused?" His voice hardened. "Mom, you don't understand how much pressure we're under. I made mistakes, yes, but everything we've done is for the family, for Sophie's future. You should be grateful we're trying to handle things." "Grateful?" My voice shook now, not from weakness, but from fury. "You would poison me in my own kitchen and expect gratitude? You would sell the house your father built and call it family duty?" "Mom, stop exaggerating," he said quickly, his voice rising. "Clara just wants what's best. Maybe she pushed too far, but we were only trying to protect you. You can't manage on your own anymore. We need to step in." I let out a hollow laugh. "Protect me? By drugging me until I stumble down the stairs? By forging my name? By plotting to lock me away in a nursing home while you pocket $600,000? That's not protection. That's betrayal." His tone shifted again, trying for gentle but slipping into impatience. "You sound paranoid, Mom." "It breaks my heart to hear you like this. Come home and we'll talk. We can fix this if you just trust us." I almost dropped the phone, the hypocrisy so thick it made me sick. Trust you? After everything? Michael, I trusted you the day I took you into my home as a child. I trusted you every night I made dinner for you, every birthday I scraped together gifts when money was tight. I trusted you when you promised you'd take care of me in old age. That trust is gone, and you're the one who broke it. For a moment, silence stretched between us. Then his voice came low, sharp like a blade. "If you go to anyone with this, Mom, you'll regret it. Families don't survive when dirty laundry gets aired in public." I tightened my grip on the phone, letting his words sear into the recorder. "You've already destroyed this family. And the only one who should regret anything is you." I hung up before he could reply. My hands shook so badly I had to set the phone down quickly. The recorder's red light blinked steadily on the desk, proof that every word had been captured. I sank into the chair, pressing my palms to my eyes. My body trembled, but I knew I had done the right thing. The conversation was damning. It showed his manipulation, his threats, his attempt to gaslight me into doubting myself. For years, I had been the quiet one, the peacemaker, the woman who smoothed over conflicts with calm words. But there was no smoothing this over. They had made their choice, and so had I. When the shaking eased, I picked up the recorder and played the conversation back, listening carefully. Michael's voice filled the room, his feigned concern, his slips into anger, his veiled threat at the end. Each word was another stone in the foundation of my case. I thought of Daniel's steady assurance, Mark's photographs, Patricia's records. Piece by piece, the truth was building into something undeniable. I whispered aloud, as if Richard were there to hear me. They think they can break me. But I will not bend. That evening, I wrote everything down in my notebook, transcribing Michael's words so there could be no doubt. Then I locked the recorder and papers in my suitcase, checked the door twice, and finally allowed myself to rest. I knew the fight was far from over. Michael and Clara wouldn't stop just because I had confronted them. If anything, they would become more desperate, more dangerous. But I no longer felt cornered. With each piece of evidence, with each recorded word, I was stepping into strength I hadn't known I still carried. The betrayal still cut deep, but alongside it was something new. Resolve. They could lie, they could threaten, they could call me confused, but I had the truth, and I had no intention of keeping it hidden. 2 days after Michael's phone call, I received a message from Patricia at the bank. Her voice was steady but urgent as she asked me to come in. My chest tightened as I hung up, knowing something was about to happen. I packed my folder of documents into my bag, slipped the recorder inside, and made my way to the bank with steps that felt heavier than they should. The lobby was quiet when I arrived, the hum of the air conditioning filling the space. Patricia met me near the entrance, her expression serious. She motioned for me to follow her into a side office. Once the door closed, she leaned in. "Mrs. Miller, I thought you should know before it happens. Your daughter-in-law is here right now. She's trying to withdraw a large sum from one of the accounts in your name." My stomach turned, but my voice came steady. "Is it the fake account?" Patricia nodded. "Yes. She came with documents, but I flagged them. They don't look right. I can't stop her alone. I need you to be present. Are you ready for this?" I gripped the strap of my handbag until my knuckles whitened. Yes, I've been waiting for this moment. Patricia led me back into the lobby. Clara stood at the counter, her hair perfectly styled, her nails tapping against the edge of the desk as she handed over a folder to the teller. She wore an expensive jacket I recognized from a high-end boutique, one I knew she could never afford on her own. Her head turned just slightly when she sensed someone behind her. When her eyes met mine, they widened for a fraction of a second before she masked it with a smile. "Catherine," she said, feigning surprise. What a coincidence. I stepped forward slowly, my heart pounding, but my voice was calm. "Not a coincidence, Clara. This is exactly where I needed to be." The teller glanced between us nervously. Patricia came forward, addressing Clara with professional firmness. "Mrs. Miller, before we proceed with this transaction, we'll need to verify the documents you've provided. And since the account is in Catherine Miller's name, it's best that she be here." Clara's smile faltered. She flipped the folder shut quickly, pressing it against her chest. "This is just routine. I'm helping my mother-in-law with her finances. She forgets things sometimes, so I handle the paperwork." I stepped closer, my gaze locked on hers. "Is that what you told them? That I'm too forgetful to manage my own money?" My voice was louder now, carrying across the marble floor of the lobby. Heads began to turn. Customers waiting in line glanced over, whispering to each other. Clara's lips tightened, but she forced another smile. "Catherine, let's not make a scene. You know how stressful things have been lately." I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope Patricia had given me days before. "I have every fraudulent transaction you've made under my name. Jewelry stores, restaurants, cash advances. You forged my signature, Clara, and you thought you could get away with it." The color drained from her face. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "You must be mistaken." Patricia stepped forward, her voice firm. "I compared the signatures myself. They don't match Mrs. Miller's records. And now, with her here to confirm, there's no doubt." The teller froze, unsure what to do. Clara's composure cracked, her voice rising. You don't understand. Michael is drowning in debt. Sophie needs tuition money. I was trying to keep us afloat. I straightened my shoulders, the weight of years of silence lifting from me. You weren't saving anyone. You were stealing from me, from the woman who welcomed you into her family, who gave you a home, who treated you like a daughter, and now you want to rob me blind and call it sacrifice. The lobby had gone still, every eye on us. Clara's cheeks flushed red, and she sputtered, trying to regain control. You're overreacting. You're too old to understand what we're dealing with. I pulled out the recorder, pressing play. Michael's voice filled the air, his words from our last call echoing through the bank. If you go to anyone with this, Mom, you'll regret it. Gasps rose from the small crowd gathering near the counters. Clara's eyes widened in panic, her hand reaching out as if to snatch the recorder, but Patricia stepped between us. Mrs. Miller, Patricia said clearly to me, would you like me to contact the authorities? I met Clara's gaze, holding it steady. For years, she had looked at me with condescension, treating me like a fragile burden. Now she looked small, cornered, her power unraveling in front of strangers. Yes, I said, call the police. Clara's mask finally slipped. You'll ruin everything, she hissed. Do you know what you're doing? Yes, I replied, my voice strong. I'm protecting what's mine. Within minutes, 2 officers entered the bank. Clara tried to argue, waving her folder, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence Patricia and I provided was too strong. The officers led her toward the exit, her face pale, her steps stumbling under the weight of humiliation. The crowd whispered as she passed, their judgment heavy in the air. As the doors closed behind them, I felt my knees weaken, but I stood tall. Patricia touched my arm gently. You did the right thing. I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. For the first time in a long time, I feel like myself again. When I left the bank that afternoon, the sun felt brighter on my face. Clara had wanted to strip me of my dignity, but instead she had been stripped of hers in front of a room full of strangers. It was only the beginning, but it was a moment I would never forget. The morning after Clara's scene at the bank, Daniel called me with urgency in his voice. Catherine, we have reason to believe Michael is trying to push the sale of your house. He and Clara scheduled a meeting at a real estate office this afternoon. I want you there, with me. The thought of them sitting across from a realtor pretending to own what Richard and I built sent fire through my veins. I agreed without hesitation. Daniel picked me up outside the inn, his presence steady as always. As we drove, he explained his plan. We'll let them dig their hole first. Once they start claiming authority, you'll walk in with me and end it. The realtor will be our witness. The more public, the better. The office was a sleek space downtown, glass walls and polished floors, the kind of place that promised bright futures and big sales. Daniel and I waited outside until we saw Michael and Clara arrive. Michael looked tired, his suit wrinkled, his eyes darting nervously. Clara, however, carried herself with false confidence, her chin lifted as if she already owned the world. Sophie trailed behind them, clutching her phone, her expression unreadable. We gave them a few minutes before stepping inside. Through the glass partition, I could see Michael shaking the realtor's hand, Clara sliding a folder of documents across the table. Her lips moved quickly, spinning lies with ease. I clenched my fists, my pulse racing. Daniel touched my arm lightly. Wait for the right moment. The receptionist led us in at Daniel's request. The realtor looked up, startled to see us. Michael froze, his mouth half open. Clara's smile faltered and Sophie's eyes widened in shock. I stood tall, though my knees trembled, and spoke with a calm that surprised even me. I believe you're discussing the sale of a house that does not belong to you. Clara recovered first, her voice sharp. Catherine, what are you doing here? We were only trying to help. The house is too much for you. You thought you could steal it, I cut in. My voice carried through the glass walls, and a few employees nearby paused their work to look over. This house was built by my husband and me. It is mine. And I have never given you power of attorney, nor signed a single paper handing it over to you. The realtor looked uneasy, glancing between us. I was told these documents gave them authority. Daniel stepped forward, his tone firm and professional. I am Catherine Miller's attorney. Those documents are fraudulent. Here are the originals, showing she retains full ownership and decision-making rights. He laid the certified papers on the table, their official seals gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Michael shifted uncomfortably, his face paling. Mom, this isn't what it looks like. We were only trying to make things easier. Easier for you, I said, my voice rising. You wanted $600,000 to cover your debts. You were willing to poison me, to lock me away, to lie about my mind so you could sell my home. Don't stand there and pretend this was for me. Clara's mask cracked then. We had no choice, she snapped. You don't understand what it's like to drown in debt. You sit in that house with everything while we struggle. I straightened, my eyes locked on hers. And whose fault is that? You forged my signature. You drained accounts. You pawned my jewelry. That's not struggle, Clara. That's greed. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Sophie's face flushed red, and for the first time she looked away from her parents, her phone hanging limply at her side. The realtor cleared his throat nervously. I can't proceed with this. I'll need to report this to the board. Yes, you will, Daniel said firmly. And I'll ensure the police have copies of every fraudulent document they attempted to use today. Clara's face twisted with fury, but Michael sank into his chair, defeated. His shoulders slumped, and for a brief moment I saw the boy he once was, ashamed and lost. But the shame was too late. I turned to Sophie, my voice softer but steady. Is this what you wanted? To see your parents humiliate themselves in front of strangers, trying to sell the home where you grew up, where your grandfather poured his heart into every brick? Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. She only lowered her gaze to the floor. I gathered the documents Daniel had presented and tucked them into my bag. This is over, I said clearly, my voice carrying to the staff, who were now openly watching from their desks. My house is not for sale, and neither am I. With that, Daniel and I walked out, leaving behind the silence of their defeat. Outside, the sunlight felt sharp and cleansing. My hands still shook, but there was a strength in me that hadn't been there before. Clara's rage, Michael's collapse, Sophie's shame, it was all burned into my memory. As Daniel unlocked the car, he looked at me with a faint smile. You handled yourself with grace, Catherine. They'll never forget this day, I exhaled, feeling the weight lift slightly from my chest. Good. Because neither will I. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, the world had seen them for what they truly were. After the confrontation at the real estate office, I knew there was no turning back. Michael and Clara had shown their faces to the world, but humiliation alone would not stop them. They would regroup, twist their story, and try again. I needed something that could not be erased, something so undeniable that they could never rewrite the narrative. That night, in the quiet of my hotel room, the idea came to me as clearly as if Richard had whispered it himself. I would take my story to the public. I sat at the desk with the small recorder by my side, its red light blinking like a reminder of the power it held. It had already captured Michael's threats and Clara's manipulations. Combined with Patricia's records and Mark's photographs, the truth was written in stone. But papers and recordings could be hidden in court filings, buried under arguments and delays. What my family feared most wasn't the law, it was exposure. If I brought their betrayal into the light for everyone to see, they would have nowhere left to hide. The thought both terrified and steadied me. I was 70 years old, not someone who knew how to navigate online platforms or build audiences. But I didn't need to be an expert. I needed only to speak the truth, raw and unshaken, and let people hear it directly from me. The next morning, I met Patricia again at the bank. She greeted me warmly, squeezing my hand. "You look stronger today," she said. "I have to be," I replied. "Patricia, I need your help with something unusual. I want to speak out publicly. Do you know anyone who can guide me through setting up a live stream?" Her eyes widened, then softened with understanding. "I do. My cousin works in communications. He's always showing me how people use these platforms. I'll connect you two." By that evening, I was sitting in a quiet office space Patricia had arranged. Her cousin, a young man named Javier, walked me through the basics with patience. "It's simple," he explained. "We'll set up an account. You just click here to go live. People will see and hear you in real time. Once you finish, the video stays online. Anyone can replay it." I stared at the screen, nerves twisting in my stomach. "And people will believe me?" Javier leaned back, his expression firm. "People believe honesty. If you speak from the heart, if you show them your proof, they'll listen. Trust me. Once this is out there, you'll have an army of strangers standing with you." Patricia touched my shoulder gently. "Let the world hear you, Catherine. You've carried this pain alone for too long." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. That night, back at the inn, I rehearsed what I would say. I practiced holding up the documents, playing back Michael's voice, showing Clara's forged papers. Each time, my hands shook a little less. I imagined Richard sitting across from me, nodding his approval. The following day, Daniel stopped by to check on me. I told him about my plan, expecting resistance, but instead his lips curved into a small smile. "It's bold," he said, "but sometimes bold is exactly what's needed." The law will catch up with them eventually, but public truth has its own kind of power. Just make sure you don't exaggerate. Stick to what you know, what you can prove. Your authenticity will carry the rest. "Then I'll do it," I said firmly. "I won't hide anymore." We spent the afternoon preparing. Daniel helped me organize the evidence into a clear order, while Patricia made copies of every document in case anything happened to the originals. Mark stopped by briefly, handing me new photographs he had taken of Clara entering yet another pawn shop. His eyes were steady when he said, "They'll try to deny everything. Show these. Show them all." When evening fell, I returned to the small office space with Javier and Patricia at my side. The room smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink, the glow of the computer screen casting light across the table. Javier adjusted the webcam, then looked at me. "Whenever you're ready, just press this button." "You'll be live," I sat down, smoothing my hands over the table and took a deep breath. My heart pounded, but I felt something else rise above the fear: resolve. For years, I had been the quiet one, the peacekeeper. Tonight, I would be the voice they could not silence. Patricia squeezed my hand one last time. "You've got this." I pressed the button. A small icon blinked on the screen, and suddenly the world could see me. At first, only a handful of viewers appeared, numbers ticking upward slowly. I introduced myself, my voice shaking but growing steadier with each word. I spoke my name, my age, and the life Richard and I had built. Then I told them about the betrayal, the lies, the theft, the poisoning attempt. I held up the documents, pressed play on the recorder, and let Michael's threats fill the room. The viewer count climbed higher and higher, comments flashing across the screen. Some were words of shock, others of support, strangers offering their belief in me. The more I spoke, the stronger I felt. My family had tried to bury me in silence, but here I was, speaking louder than ever. By the time I ended the stream, thousands had heard me. The evidence was no longer just in my hands, it was out in the open, undeniable. I sat back, tears streaming down my face, and whispered to myself, Richard, I did it. They can't hide anymore. That night, I didn't sleep much, but for once it wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was the rush of knowing the truth was no longer mine alone to carry. When I woke the next morning, the video was everywhere. My phone buzzed nonstop, the screen lighting up with notifications faster than I could read them. Patricia called me first, her voice trembling with awe. "Catherine, you don't understand." It's gone viral. People are sharing it across every platform. You've struck a chord. I logged onto the account Javier had set up and nearly dropped the phone. More than 5,000 views had already turned into tens of thousands overnight. The comments section filled with strangers calling me brave, telling me their own stories of betrayal, offering support from across the country. I sat on the bed, my chest tight with emotion. For so long, I had felt invisible, silenced in my own home. Now, my voice had echoed farther than I ever thought possible. By noon, local news outlets were calling. A reporter left a message on the inn's phone, asking for an interview. Daniel cautioned me to hold off, but I could hear approval in his tone when we spoke. "The exposure helps us, Catherine. It ensures they can't paint you as delusional or confused. The court of public opinion is already leaning your way." Not long after, my phone rang again, but this time it wasn't Patricia or Daniel. It was Michael. His name flashed across the screen like a wound reopening. Against my better judgment, I answered, pressing the recorder as I had before. "Mom," he said, his voice frantic, "take it down. Please, you don't know what you're doing. You've embarrassed us in front of everyone." I closed my eyes, steadying myself. "I didn't embarrass you, Michael. You embarrassed yourself. All I did was shine a light on the truth. You've destroyed our lives," he shouted. "Sophie can't show her face at school. Clara is being harassed. People are calling us monsters. You did that," I said quietly. "Not me. I begged for honesty, for decency, for family. You chose greed. You chose betrayal. And now the world knows." Clara's voice suddenly joined the call in the background, shrill and furious. "Catherine, how dare you? You think strangers on the internet will save you? This is family business, not their concern." I held the phone close, speaking with the calm that had eluded me for weeks. Family doesn't poison family. Family doesn't steal identities or pawn heirlooms. What you did stopped being private the moment you tried to erase me. There was silence, broken only by Michael's uneven breathing. Then he muttered, "You'll regret this, Mom. You don't know the damage you've caused." I ended the call, my hands trembling but my resolve solid. The recorder captured every word, another brick in the fortress I was building. That evening, I returned to the small office with Patricia and Javier. Together, we replayed the live stream, analyzing the comments. Messages poured in from people I had never met. A woman in Ohio who said her son had drained her savings, a man in Texas whose niece forged his name on a loan. My story had become their story, a mirror reflecting countless wounds. As the viewer count soared past 50,000, I decided to go live again, this time with Patricia at my side. She introduced herself, confirming she was the banker who had uncovered the fraudulent accounts. I showed the documents once more, careful to hold them clearly to the camera. Then I pressed play on the recording of Michael's threats. His voice filled the speakers, undeniable, raw. The comments exploded with outrage. People demanded justice, some tagging local authorities, others promising to share until no one could ignore it. One message scrolled past that made me pause. "You're not alone, Catherine. We're with you." I felt tears prick my eyes as I read it aloud. "I'm not alone," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Not anymore." By the time I ended the second stream, more than 5,000 people were watching live. The numbers only grew afterward. News outlets picked it up, headlines flashing across screens. "Elderly woman exposes family betrayal online." My face, worn with age but burning with determination, was everywhere. Back in the quiet of my in-room, I sat with my head in my hands. The exposure was overwhelming, but it was also freeing. For years, I had been afraid of making noise, of upsetting the delicate balance of family. But silence had nearly cost me my life. Now my words had carried farther than I ever imagined. Daniel called that night, his tone steadier than ever. "They'll try to spin it, Catherine, but they can't undo what's been seen. You've turned public opinion into your shield. This is the kind of momentum that forces the law to act quickly." I thought of Richard then, of how proud he would have been to see me rise after being pushed so low. I whispered to the photograph on the nightstand, "We made it this far, Richard. And I'll keep going." The next morning, I woke to find the video had passed 100,000 views. Journalists camped outside the bank where Clara had been caught, asking questions. Neighbors whispered about Michael's debts, Sophie's lies, Clara's greed. The walls they had built around their schemes were crumbling. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were tired, my face lined with years, but beneath it all was a strength I hadn't known remained. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting, and I was winning. The morning after the live stream reached 100,000 views, I woke to find my phone vibrating against the nightstand again. This time it wasn't reporters or Patricia or Daniel. The name on the screen made me pause. Sophie. For a long moment, I just stared at it, my heart caught between anger and sorrow. My thumb hovered, then I pressed accept. "Grandma," her voice cracked through the line, raw and trembling. "Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you." I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the phone tightly. "You should be in school, Sophie. Not plotting with your parents to take everything from me." She sobbed softly. "I know. I was wrong. I lied. I told people you had Alzheimer's because Dad told me to. He said it would make people pity us, that it would get us what we needed. But I hate myself for it. Everyone knows now. My friends stopped speaking to me. Even my professors look at me differently. I can't live with it anymore." Her words poured out, uneven and desperate. I stayed silent, letting her speak. After a moment, she said, "I watched your live stream. All of it. I heard Dad threatening you. I saw the papers, the recordings. I can't pretend anymore. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to lose you." I pressed my free hand against my chest, trying to steady the ache there. "Do you understand what you did to me, Sophie? You made me out to be crazy, weak, a shell of myself. Do you know how that feels?" "Yes," she whispered, "because now people look at me like I'm the liar I am. And I deserve it, but I want to make it right. Please, Grandma, let me. I'll testify. I'll tell everyone what they made me do." The room was quiet except for the sound of her crying. I thought back to the little girl who once baked cookies with me, who wrapped her small arms around my waist when she scraped her knee. Somewhere along the way, she had been pulled into their web of greed, but now I could hear the child I once knew breaking through. "If you mean this," I said finally, "then don't just tell me. Show the world. Stand with me in the light the way you once stood with them in the dark." "I will," she said quickly. "Just tell me what to do." Later that week, Daniel arranged for Sophie to meet us at his office. She looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders hunched as if the weight of shame pressed them down. She wouldn't meet my eyes at first, but when Daniel asked her to speak, she lifted her chin and confessed in full. She described how her parents coached her to spread lies, how Clara had rehearsed lines for her to use if anyone questioned her. She admitted to borrowing money under false pretenses and promised to pay it back. When she finished, her voice cracked again. "I betrayed you, Grandma. But I want to be better. I want people to know the truth, even if they hate me for it." I looked at her for a long time, my heart torn in two. Betrayal doesn't vanish with words, but in her eyes I saw something her parents no longer had, remorse. That was enough to give me hope. I reached across the table, taking her trembling hand in mine. You can't erase what you've done. But you can choose who you'll be from this day on. If you stand by me in court, if you tell the truth, you'll begin to make amends. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she nodded. I promise. The day of the hearing arrived, and the courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back, cameras flashing as we entered. I sat with Daniel on one side, Sophie beside me, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across the aisle, Michael and Clara avoided looking at us, their lawyer whispering furiously in their ears. When it was Sophie's turn to take the stand, she rose with trembling legs but a steady voice. She faced the jury and spoke clearly, every word cutting through the room. I lied about my grandmother. I told people she was sick, that she couldn't remember things because my parents told me to. They wanted me to discredit her so they could take her house and her money. I went along with it, and I regret it more than anything I've ever done. Her voice broke then, but she forced herself to continue. I betrayed the only person who ever loved me unconditionally. And I'm here now to tell the truth, no matter what happens to me. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the judge leaned forward, his expression softened. As Sophie stepped down from the stand, she glanced at me, tears streaking her cheeks. I reached out and squeezed her hand as she passed, whispering, "I'm proud of you for finally being brave." That moment didn't erase the pain, but it gave me a glimpse of healing. Sophie had chosen a different path, and for the first time in months, I felt the faint stirrings of hope that our family wasn't entirely lost. The day of the final hearing dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself understood the weight of what was about to happen. I stood outside the courthouse with Daniel by my side, clutching my folder of documents as though they were armor. Reporters gathered on the steps, calling out my name, cameras flashing. For a moment I felt small under the attention, but then I reminded myself that this was not about spectacle. This was about justice. I lifted my chin and walked forward. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Michael and Clara sat at the defense table, their lawyer whispering furiously in their ears. Michael looked worn, his suit ill-fitting, his hair disheveled. Clara wore a mask of defiance, but I could see the fear behind her eyes. Sophie sat beside me on the other side of the aisle, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her face pale but determined. The judge entered, and the room rose to its feet. When we sat again, the prosecutor began to lay out the case. Piece by piece, they presented the evidence Mark had uncovered. Clara at the pawn shop, Michael's gambling debts, the forged credit card accounts. They played the recording of Michael's voice, his threat clear and sharp. "If you go to anyone with this, Mom, you'll regret it." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Then came Patricia, calm and professional as she testified about the fraudulent account opened under my name. She described how she had flagged the signature, how Clara had tried to withdraw money, and how the evidence matched perfectly with the charges. The jury watched closely, nodding as she spoke. Mark followed, presenting photographs, receipts, and bank statements. His voice was steady as he explained each piece, connecting the threads until the web of lies was undeniable. He spoke not with malice, but with clarity, letting the facts stand on their own. Finally, it was Sophie's turn. My heart pounded as she walked to the stand, her small frame trembling, but her eyes shining with resolve. She swore her oath, then spoke in a voice that carried through every corner of the room. She admitted the lies, the manipulation, the way her parents had pressured her to discredit me. "I betrayed my grandmother," she said, tears running down her cheeks. "But I will not betray her again. Everything she has said is true. They wanted her out of the way so they could take the house and the money. I was part of it, but I stand here now to make it right." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge's expression softened as he watched her. Michael buried his face in his hands, while Clara glared at her daughter with venom in her eyes. But Sophie didn't falter. She returned to her seat beside me, and I squeezed her hand, whispering, "I'm proud of you." When the defense attempted to argue, their words rang hollow. They tried to paint me as confused, unstable, too old to manage my affairs. But the live stream had already reached hundreds of thousands, and the jury had seen me stand in front of them with clarity and strength. They had heard my voice, my recordings, and Sophie's confession. The lies could no longer hold. The prosecutor's closing statement was simple, yet powerful. This case is not about a woman who cannot manage her life. It is about a woman who managed to protect herself against the very people she should have been able to trust most. It is about greed, manipulation, and betrayal. And it is about the courage to fight back. The evidence speaks for itself. The jury left to deliberate. The room buzzed with whispers, every second stretching endlessly. I sat in silence, my hands folded tightly, my mind whispering Richard's name. I thought of the home we had built, the garden he had tended, the nights we had dreamed of growing old together. I thought of how close I had come to losing it all, and how far I had come to protect it. When the jury returned, the foreman stood. My heart hammered in my chest as he read the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendants, Michael Miller and Clara Miller, guilty on all counts: fraud, financial abuse, and conspiracy. The words rang through the courtroom like a bell. I felt my breath release in a shudder, tears streaming down my face. Michael slumped back in his chair, his face gray, while Clara erupted, shouting, "At the judge, at me, at anyone who would listen." The bailiffs restrained her, her shrill voice echoing even as she was led away. The judge's gavel struck, restoring order. His words followed with finality. Sentencing will be carried out in accordance with the law. This court recognizes the courage of the victim, Mrs. Catherine Miller, in bringing the truth forward. I sat frozen for a moment, unable to believe it was real. Then Sophie's hand slipped into mine, and Daniel leaned toward me. "It's over," he whispered. "You did it." As we left the courtroom, reporters crowded around, their microphones thrust forward, questions flying. But I didn't need to say much. My silence, my tears, my steady walk down those courthouse steps spoke louder than any words. For the first time in months, the weight on my shoulders lifted. I paused at the bottom of the steps, looking up at the sky. The clouds had parted, sunlight breaking through as if the world itself had shifted. I whispered under my breath, "We made it, Richard. Justice is ours." When the trial was finally over, I felt as though I had stepped out of a storm into calm air. The courthouse doors closed behind me, and for the first time in months I could breathe without fear clawing at my chest. Michael and Clara were no longer shadows lurking over my every move. They were behind bars, left to face the weight of their choices. Justice had been served, but healing was something entirely different, something I still had to find. I sold the old house soon after, not because I lost it, but because I chose to. That place carried too many ghosts, too many rooms echoing with betrayal. I used part of the proceeds to buy a smaller cottage just outside of town, a modest place with a patch of land big enough for a garden. When I first stepped inside, the air smelled of fresh paint and pine, untouched by lies or poison. It felt like a beginning, not a reminder. Sophie moved in with me. At first, it was awkward, the silence heavy with everything left unsaid. She tiptoed around me, unsure if she had the right to call this place home after what she had done. But slowly, day by day, the walls came down. She helped me plant roses in the backyard, her hands in the soil beside mine. One evening, as we watered the small shoots together, she whispered, "I don't deserve your kindness, Grandma." I set the watering can down and turned to her. Kindness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing, and I choose to believe you can be better. She cried then, throwing her arms around me, and I held her as tightly as I had when she was little. In that moment, I felt something mend inside me. Forgiveness didn't erase the pain, but it gave it purpose. Life settled into a rhythm. I started each morning in the garden, the sun warming my face as I pulled weeds or tended to the flowers. Sophie began her classes again, but this time in law. "I want to help people the way Daniel helped you," she said one night as we sat at the kitchen table. I smiled, seeing the determination in her eyes. "Then you'll turn your mistake into someone else's salvation," I told her. I found my own purpose too. With Daniel's encouragement, I began a small foundation using part of the money I had fought so hard to protect. We called it the Richard Miller Fund, in honor of the man who built the life they had tried to steal. Its mission was simple: to provide resources and legal aid for elderly people facing financial abuse. Each donation, each letter of gratitude from strangers who found strength in my story, became a stone in the path towards something bigger than me. The live streams had made me unexpectedly visible. Letters poured in from people across the country, sharing stories of their own betrayals, their own fights to be heard. Some wrote simply to say thank you, that hearing me stand up had given them the courage to do the same. I read every one, often with tears blurring the ink. Pain connected us, but so did resilience. One evening, as the sky turned gold over the garden, I sat with Richard's framed photograph on the porch. The flowers swayed in the breeze. Sophie's laughter drifted through the open window as she studied, and the world felt still. I whispered to him as if he could hear me. "We made it, Richard." They tried to break me, but I stood. I think you'd be proud. Sometimes the memories still came, sharp as glass. The bitter taste of tea laced with too much powder. Michael's voice telling me I was confused. Clara's cold eyes as she forged my name. But now, those memories didn't crush me. They reminded me of the strength I had found, the strength I never thought I still carried at 70 years old. Healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about planting new seeds in soil once poisoned, watching them grow toward the sun. It was about hearing Sophie laugh again, about watching her rebuild her future with honesty. It was about knowing that when I spoke, people listened. Not because I shouted, but because I spoke the truth. As I closed my eyes that evening, the scent of roses drifting through the air, I realized something I had never dared to believe before. It was never too late. Not too late to fight. Not too late to reclaim my dignity. Not too late to begin again. My life was different now, scarred but stronger, marked by both loss and triumph. And in that balance, I finally found peace. The past would always be part of me, but it no longer defined me. What defined me now was the choice to live, to love, and to leave behind more than pain. My story wasn't just survival. It was proof that even in the quietest voices, justice can roar,